everyone. Welcome to The Download, where we bring you discussion and analysis from a Catholic perspective. Today's Thursday, August 10th, 2023. I'm Christine Niles, here with my two co-hosts, Kyle Kobe and Trey Brock. The FBI is targeting Catholics. That story's been in the news for ages now, starting with a memo that got leaked earlier this year that talked about the supposed threat posed by, quote, radical traditionalist Catholics. Church Militant was mentioned by name in the document, calling us far-right Catholic media. After public outcry, the FBI backtracked, saying the leaked report, quote, does not meet the exacting standards of the FBI, close quote. It also claimed it was limited to the Richmond, Virginia office, but that turns out to be false. Republicans on the House Judiciary Committee say they've obtained documents showing the FBI's targeting of radical traditionalist Catholics goes farther and deeper than we knew. To get into this more, we'll be talking with one of our reporters, Dr. William Mahoney, about what two Republicans said in a letter yesterday. Hello, William. How are you? Tell us more about this.
So what's going on here is that, Christopher Wray, who was at hearings for the Judicial Committee, the House's Judicial Committee twice, once in March, once in July, he said this was just limited to the field office in Richmond and that it's been scrubbed from all their FBI websites for the reasons you mentioned. Well, since then, two of these House representatives, Jim Jordan from Ohio and Michael Johnson from Louisiana, were looking for more information because the documents they originally received were redacted, and probably heavily. So they were asking the FBI for less, for the documents that weren't redacted. The FBI was not cooperating. They finally threatened them with holding them in contempt of Congress, and which the FBI finally released some documents. Well, the new information that has surfaced is that the Portland and the Los Angeles field offices were also involved. So they were, helping draft it and going back and forth. Now, the FBI, since that's come out, told the New York Post that, Christopher Wray didn't lie because they didn't publish the document. Only the Richmond office did. So he's correct. They weren't involved in the publication. But that's, they're just playing word games at this point.
Sure. I mean, this has gone viral. Everyone's talking about it on social media, and it's very upsetting and kind of scary for us Catholics, right? Because Definitely. In the letter, obviously, they're claiming they're targeting extremists who are prone to violence, but they lump in a bunch of good Catholics in it as well. And I think that's the concern here is this kind of going after people for our beliefs as Catholics and naming Catholics in this. But let's talk about Wray, because he was under the hot seat. He was caught. They're saying he's not lying, but clearly we've got other offices that were, they kept saying this for months. Oh, it's just the Richmond office, Richmond office. And now we know Los Angeles and Portland were involved. Maybe others were involved as well. But Wray, I think, was also caught lying about saying that they weren't surveilling school boards, like school board meetings. And that turns out by FBI whistleblower to be totally false. What are we to make of this FBI under Biden's administration?
I think Christopher Wray, there's really only two possibilities here. The first, that he's lying, or the second, that he doesn't know what's going on in the FBI. Either way, he should be disqualified as the head of the FBI, because if he doesn't know what's going on, why is he there? And if he's lying, why is he there? And it seems that, my suspicion is probably more that he's lying. I can't absolutely prove that, but that would be my suspicion. And it seems that under the Biden administration, they choose people quite deliberately that they know will play along with whatever agenda they have. So they're deliberately putting people in positions of power who will do Biden's bidding, let's say. So that's right. That's what it looks like to me.
Right.
Yeah, William, you kind of mentioned this earlier, but I just wanted to highlight this point for people. The FBI has responded to this letter by Johnson and Jordan. And as you pointed out, they defend Wray. I can't believe this. Clearly he's lying. At the very least, he's being evasive. All this, gobbledygook speech they're throwing in there about, he didn't lie. It was the Richmond office that simply produced the document. None of these other offices that were mentioned. It's at least 2 that we know of that were involved in this, the LA field office and the Portland field office. Who knows however many other ones were involved? Will we ever find that information out? I don't know. But then they play these word games of, well, the document came out of the Richmond office, so therefore, what he said was actually accurate. I can't believe they're getting away with that. Feel free to comment on that, but also, what sort of repercussions may be coming down for Ray, do you think? Is there something, I think I read towards the end of this month, maybe he has to submit a response?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it seems like these hearings, these congressional hearings, they never seem to go anywhere. They've dragged in the Facebook guy, they've dragged in the Twitter guy once upon a time, they've dragged in the head of Planned Parenthood after the human baby body parts being sold, and nothing ever seems to come of it. So they have these hearings and they go around in circles. I don't know what their next steps are. I know what I think they should do, and I'll comment on that. They should do what they do in Florida. Forget the congressional hearings. Like, do an indictment. Like, get him indicted, so that there's actual clear threat to him that way. But these hearings, I don't know, they never seem to go anywhere. I don't know what they're planning next, so that's what I think about that.
Yeah, it seems like, at least something should be done, but it remains to be seen exactly how far the Republicans are going to go to push this issue. Is it just going to be one of those things that, on the next news cycle, it just gets thrown out and everyone forgets about it? I hope that's not the case. I hope they do push the issue.
Ray's hoping that's the case.
Exactly. I want to turn it over to Trey Brock now.
And William, all this talk about radical traditionalist Catholicism, what do you mean by that? It sounds ambiguous. What do you think they mean by that?
I don't mean anything by it. So what they mean by, you asked me, what do I think they mean by that? It's not really quite clear. They might. I think they do have some lone actors who are associated with some traditional Catholic mass and stuff like that. But as a whole, I'm not sure what they mean. I can't imagine they have an overwhelming amount of evidence of people with guns and all these other things actually planning anything. I think it sounds to me, if you look at the Biden administration, he says, Biden says he's a Catholic, and yet he's against pretty much everything the Catholic Church teaches as far as his policy is concerned on everything. I mean, just all the moral and social issues. So I think what they mean by it is just Catholics, really, just the ones that actually hold the faith. So if people believe these doctrinal things on faith and morals, especially when it comes to the LGBTQ community and all, then they're a threat. They're a threat to the opposite, really what it is their opposite worldview, right? And their own teachings and their own religion, the religion of the left, that they see Catholicism as a threat to that. So they're just trying to attack it from every which way they can. That's what it looks like to me.
Right. Very, very concerning developments in the FBI. Thank you so much for chatting with us today and giving us this update, William.
Sure. You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. So, with this memo that we have, and we encourage people out there to read it, the FBI tries to make a distinction between radical traditionalist Catholics, right, RTCs, and that's the focus of this memo, versus traditional Catholics. There's a little footnote, I believe you have it if you want to read it,
sure,
where they try to distinguish between, we're not going after the traditional Catholics who are simply pre-Vatican II and they love the traditional Latin Mass. We're going to go after the radical traditionalist Catholics. What do they say in that footnote?
Well, first of all, I want to point out that, a lot of Catholics out there, internet personalities and the like, we're actually taking this badge, RTC, Radical Traditionalist Catholic. They were taking this badge as sort of a badge of honor. They were putting it on their, Twitter pages and whatnot, saying, I'm RTC, I'm a Radical Traditionalist Catholic because the FBI is targeting me. It's clear to me that those people, well-intentioned, they want to feel like they're being persecuted, and we are being persecuted. I don't want to downplay that. But it's clear to me those people didn't actually read this memo, because the FBI actually clarified, not in the best way possible, but they did at least attempt to clarify in a footnote what they mean by RTC, Radical Traditionalist Catholic. So the first footnote of the whole document, and I encourage people to go out and read this. It's not a long document at all. It's the footnote letter A, lowercase a down there. It's an analyst note. And it defines RTC, Radical Traditionalist Catholics, as this. It's quite long, but bear with me. Quote, RTCs are typically characterized by the rejection of the Second Vatican Council, Vatican II, as a valid church council. disdain for most of the popes elected since Vatican II, particularly Pope Francis and Pope John Paul II, and frequent adherence to anti-Semitic, anti-immigration, anti-LGBTQ, and white supremacist ideology. Radical traditionalist Catholics compose a small minority of overall Roman Catholic adherents and are separate and distinct from traditionalist Catholics, so they do make that nuance there. Traditionalist Catholics who prefer the traditional Latin Mass and pre-Vatican II teachings and traditions, but without the more extremist ideological beliefs and violent rhetoric. I actually think this is a pretty well put together paragraph here in the footnote. Now, to the untrained eye, people are going to gloss right over this, and they're going to say RTC is just one thing, and it's any good traditionalist Catholics. But you need to make the distinction here, because church militants, the people who are aligned with us, we are not technically RTCs. We accept the Second Vatican Council. We accept Pope Francis, Pope John Paul II. We're not calling for the eradication of people of a certain skin color, of people of a certain religion. So we actually wouldn't fall under this category.
Right. I think that's an important distinction on the one hand, because everybody's saying, oh, they're going after traditional Catholics. No, well, that's not quite right. They're going after radical traditionalists, and they mention in there the violent, the violent element. And I do want to clarify something, just as an attorney, who studied constitutional law. This memo is clearly unconstitutional, not because they're going after violent extremism. The FBI should be going after violent extremists. That's what they're supposed to be doing. Shouldn't matter what religion they are. If it's a violent extremist Muslim, fine, arrest him. Hindu, Buddhist, Jew, whoever. If you're violent and you want to go and kill a bunch of people for whatever reason, absolutely the FBI has the right to do that. What they don't get to do is they don't get to target people for their religious beliefs. They don't get to say, you're Catholic and you believe these things, and therefore we're going to start surveilling you. And I think that's the concern here, is when they say anti-LGBT. Well, what does that mean? There's such a broad range of how you can define that. Do they mean, I want to go and kill all the gays? Is that what they mean? Or do they mean, I am pro-marriage between a man and a woman? Is that anti-LGBT?
Big distinction.
That's my Catholic belief. You don't get to surveil me because I have that Catholic belief. That's protected under the First Amendment. Same thing with anti-abortion. What does that mean? I want to go and kill a bunch of abortionists, or I want to protect the unborn in peaceful, prayerful means. It's like this whole range of things, and the concern here is they're lumping it all together.
Well, I think that's the entire discussion, is making that distinction. They throw out terms like anti-Semitic, homophobic, misogynist. To your point, what does that mean? What do Catholics believe? Anti-Semitism. Okay, well, Catholics, they want the Jews to come to Christ. They want people who are living a homosexual lifestyle to stop doing it, stop destroying their soul. They want Catholics believe the wife, that's the heart of the home. All of these things, and that's what the church teaches. And so that it's the distinction that matters, and that's what I think all of this is about. And so if radical traditionalist Catholic ideology, I know that you broke it down for us, but if that's what they hate, and I think to William, what William said, I tend to agree with that. I think that is what the government does hate. I think that's what they do hate. They do hate what the church actually teaches, and so I know they make that distinction, which is it's kind of good to break that down and everything. But so that distinction, that's the most important part of this whole discussion.
And this is what bothers me so much, because they include church militant in this, right? They name church militant as a Catholic far-right media working with certain whatever political elements, as if we're like part of this shady terrorist group. And what bothers me about this is they lump in the truly dangerous people, right, the truly violent extremists, with the rest of us. And so they put a target on our backs. And so I think we have to be honest here and mention the FBI was really focusing on the SSPX in this, Society of St. Pius X. They're named more than a dozen times. They're actively surveilling SSPX churches. I mean, they're named all through this. And one of the people that they arrested was attending the SSPX. He called himself anti-Zionist and anti-progressive. And that can be defined in very different ways. But the problem here is when he was arrested, this is what they found. Quote, 8 Molotov cocktails, 6 smoke bombs, 1 smoke grenade, firearms components consisting of a complete Glock 19 slide upper receiver, a lower parts kit, a 3D printed Glock 19 frame, a magazine, and 9mm ammunition were found in his possession. Okay, so this guy's a total nutcase, and he should have been arrested because it looks like he's going to go out and do something very violent. And then they noticed two others. They talk about two others who attended the SSPX, and they arrested them as well, or one of them passed away. And they were also on that extremist fringe. We are not part of that. Church militant shouldn't even be in here. Neither should the vast majority of traditional Catholics. They're not part of this. And the FBI is not making that distinction. So they're trying to smear all of us with this paintbrush.
Yeah, I think it's important too, because I know we're going to be accused of this, just for the mere fact that we brought up the SSPX. Someone out there is going to claim that now, Church Militant is saying that every member of the SSPX is now, a domestic terrorist, which is not what we're saying. There are many good people there. Unfortunately, the wool is over their eyes. They don't realize they're in a schismatic movement, and they should move out of that. They don't realize that, and unfortunately, bad actors have crept into those organizations. Who espouse these really, the things that they're talking about, the violence. There's people who are actually, espousing that within those groups, and it creeps into the SSPX. It creeps into even, church-approved similar groups, that are in communion with Rome, like the FSSB. I've seen these things. I've heard conversations. It goes on anywhere where you find conservative Catholics. There's that temptation for this stuff to creep in.
Absolutely, that's true. And
I was just going to add on to what Kyle was saying. I think that even if you do, if the FBI, so I guess all of their investigations had to do with SSPX parishes, correct?
Those are the ones named here.
Right.
We don't know if there might be other ones.
Others.
Yeah. So I think it's worth noting, and this is what I think, that if the FBI did an investigation into a lot of parishes, Latin Mass parishes everywhere, or just Novus Ordo parishes, you're going to find some crackpots. Like you're not going to find these, I don't know what the bombs and all that stuff is about, but you're going to find some broken people, some people with some crazy ideologies. Nobody in all these parishes, nobody's perfect, and so I don't know. I think that if they did a deep dive investigation anywhere, they're going to find some, like I said, they're going to find some crackpots. So to your point, Kyle, to take these examples, and I know this is not what you're doing, Christine, but to take these examples of these individual people in the SSPX, and for anybody to say that, oh, this is what these guys believe. Well, the SSPX don't have an official stance on, they don't have an official position. They're not, they're not anti-Semitic, or they're not trying to kill a bunch of gay people or whatever. That's not what we're trying to say at all. But I think it's worth noting, they look into these parishes, and that's what they found. But I think I agree with your point, Kyle.
Yeah, I will say though that there are some groups that tend to attract these extremist elements more than others. I do believe that there are some communities that attract these extremist elements more than others. I don't think Catholics in your typical Novus Ordo parish are going to attract these sort of extremists. Whereas in my dealings with various, I don't want to just single out the SSPX. There's some others as well who are on that more radicalist side. I've encountered a much larger number of people who are more like that than in the Novus Ordo Church. And again, I'm not trying to attack the SSPX. I know that there are a lot of good people there. I'm friends with people who go to the SSPX. I'm friends with some of the priests who've actually helped in my sex abuse investigation. So I just want to make that clear. This is not an attack on them. We're just talking about the FBI memo. But here's my question. Okay, fine. If you want to take a look at some of the more violent extremist elements in some of these radical traditionalist groups, I hope you're doing the same thing with, for instance, Islamic groups. Are you doing that? Because we know for a fact there are a lot of suicide bombers among the. It's not like Catholics go around being suicide bombers. So as long as you're applying this equally to everyone and not just singling out, the Catholics. Let's focus on the Catholics.
I would hope so, or else the double standard would definitely apply there. I'm not going to hold my breath for the leaked memo about the mosques that are being investigated. We saw a lot of that post 9/11, and I'm sure it's still going on. But that's not what the mainstream media wants to focus on right now. I just want to note real quick. It was kind of funny. We've mentioned this before, but there were people out there that were saying that Church Militant was colluding with the FBI when this thing was first leaked about a year ago. And they were saying, well, all they did was they looked at this appendix at the end of it. It was a list of 9 organizations, I think it was. We weren't a part of that list. Like at the end, it was like they got this from the Southern Poverty Law Center, a very trustworthy, reputable organization right there. And they didn't read the whole document again because we were named specifically on page 4. We had a couple sentences devoted to us, and they were trying to say, oh no, Church Militant is colluding with the FBI because they weren't at the end of the document, which is ridiculous. I mean, these people, these internet personalities, they can go and Photoshop Michael Voris wearing an FBI jacket all they want. But it doesn't change the facts on the ground that we were named in the document, unfortunately, and that they're lumping us in with that.
Exactly. I think the FBI has sort of a love-hate relationship with Church Militant, because I do know that they're aware of our sex abuse investigations, and they appreciate that, as they should, as any good government official should, because you should be, looking at sex abuse and cover-up, absolutely. So they love us because of that, but then they hate us because of what we actually believe as Catholics. So.
Yeah, it's interesting too because you look at how this whole thing played out with the investigation. Good on these two representatives, these two Republicans from the House Judiciary Committee. Again, that's Jim Jordan and Mike Johnson, and take it upon themselves to actually go forward with this investigation, write the letter. I mean, what they uncovered was pretty incredible. The fact that Ray lied about it being just a single field office. I mean, he explicitly said that. We have his own words saying that, and then we immediately took steps to withdraw this document from all of our FBI files and everything. Like, I'm sure that has happened. Right. I mean, how do we know? How can we actually verify that? And Jordan and Johnson, they want verification. Right? They're calling on FBI Director Wray to amend his testimony. I mean, that would be great. For him to come out and apologize, that would be awesome. I'm, again, not going to hold my breath. I don't think it's going to happen, but that's what they're calling for. They also want a transcribed interview with whoever it was at the Richmond field office that approved this memo. For some reason, I'm sure obviously someone knows, but that hasn't been made public. They want that information there. They want to interview with that person. And, again, Ray has, according to the Judiciary Committee, until I think August 22nd to comply with this. I'm not sure exactly how that works out, but it remains to be seen. And
the question, too, is will there be any repercussions for any of this? Because the complaint is that these hearings, these public hearings where Ray sits there and he's grilled, or Merrick Garland sits there and he's grilled by all these angry congressmen. Some people say that's just political theater. It's just to get up there and make the public feel good like something's happening. But then are there any actual repercussions? Because we know that this is not the first time Ray has lied about something. Remember that big political firestorm that happened when there was that memo from Merrick Garland saying that essentially treating angry moms at school board meetings as domestic terrorists, and we need to start surveilling them. And people were outraged. Of course, he got grilled about it. And Ray said, school board meetings are not being surveilled by the FBI. Nobody's surveilling them. And then this FBI whistleblower, Steve Friend, this is what he tweeted. He said, okay, quote, Ray said special agents did not conduct surveillance of school boards. He lied. The Joint Terrorism Task Force in my office did it. I testified about the details in May. He also claims that Ray lied about reassigning special agents who were investigating child porn and child sex trafficking to the January 6th investigation. And also, who else? So I don't know if you know this, but under the Biden administration, they have greatly restricted their child sex trafficking investigations. Under Trump was expanding it. Yeah. He was like, there's all sorts of child sex trafficking happening in the country, at the border. I'm going to expand the office and make more arrests. Under Biden, they've greatly contracted. I wonder why that is. But Ray apparently took those officials and put them on the January 6th commission, as if that's a more pressing issue in this country.
A lot of this stuff, it's a little bit scary, just because we're talking about persecution here, and persecution of Christians. I want to read a quote from one of these documents talking about RTCs was further demonstrated through the increase in hostility toward abortion rights advocates. And it's like, well, Well, yeah, of course, we have hostility towards slaughtering the unborn, and so I think the point here is that, Christians are going to be persecuted. Christians are going to be attacked by a godless administration, a godless secular state, which is what we have right now. There's a quote we have from St. Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, who says, "The struggle between Christ and the Antichrist rages openly, and so if you decide for Christ, you can even be asked to sacrifice your life. Contemplate the Lord who hangs before you on the wood, because he was obedient even to the death of the cross. He came into the world not to do his own will, but that of his Father. And if you wish to be the spouse of the crucified, you must renounce completely your own will and have no other aspiration than to do the will of God." And so I think that's the whole point there, is that our disposition as Catholics is that, yeah, I will be willing to die for the truth, for the sake of the truth, for Christ. Obviously, that's not always going to happen, but it's the disposition that our Lord's looking for. Yeah, are you willing to lay down your life for the sake of me, for the sake of truth, which is what the kingdom is all about, having that disposition. And so it's a little bit scary, but our Lord, he provides. And so I think a lot of this hostility towards Catholics, is persecution towards Catholics. Don't let that scare you away from living the faith out, because that's what our Lord wants, and that's what true freedom is. That's what true peace is. That's what true joy is having that disposition.
I think there's going to be two responses from Catholics out here. One of them is going to be fear. Right? Oh, the government's coming after us. Well, look, the government has always been coming after you since the Roman Empire, right? You look at church history and, the loggerhead between church and state, the world, the flesh, and the devil, our battle against that, it's always been there and it will always be there. Yes, maybe things are ramping up now in this country like, we've never seen before. Certain generations who have grown up in this country, who are still in this country, have never seen this. But that's okay. Your ancestors in the faith have experienced this. One of those, you mentioned Edith Stein, Sister Benedicta there. One of those in a similar vein would be St. Colette. St. Colette said something very similar when it comes to how to deal with these persecutions and hardships of the faith. She says this: "If there be a true way that leads to the everlasting kingdom, it most certainly is that of suffering patiently endured." So whatever comes our way, I don't care if the FBI is going to set up cameras in each and every one of our homes. Whatever comes our way, patiently endure it for the sake of our Lord, because that is the way how we get to that everlasting kingdom.
Absolutely. And of course, St. Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, she actually lived out those words. She was taken in the gas chambers by the Nazis. She was killed there because she was a Jew. She was a Jew who converted to Catholicism. They didn't care. All that mattered was that she was a Jew. So she was taken to the gas chambers, and she died that way. So she absolutely lived that out.
And I know you've read the, we were talking about on the going to D.C., the book by that priest who was in the gulags.
Father Cizek, yeah.
Yeah, Cizek. That is one of my favorite books. He Leadeth Me. I know that you read the one that he wrote a couple decades before, but I remember one of the best lines in there, because he was going through all this persecution. He had a big parish. He was, living the life of a priest that every priest wants, and then he's in the gulag and he can't offer mass. He can't do anything, and he's wondering what's God's will for me? What's God's will for me? And he just says right there, God's will for me is right now. Oh, I figured it out. This is God's will for me. So it speaks to your point of suffering patiently, suffering well. And he obviously is another example of somebody who lived that out.
Right. And we can certainly ask God to take away the suffering, but if the suffering comes, pray for the strength to endure it, pray for resignation. And just remember, the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. It was the martyrdom of the early Catholics, the early Christians, that actually God used that, right, for the salvation of souls to spread his church. And so we may be facing very dark times, but that doesn't mean that God's not working in the midst of that darkness. So, all right, well, thank you so much for joining us for today's episode of The Download. Now, please join us as we finish in prayer, begging Our Lady's intercession for our nation and for our church. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Salve Regina, Mater Misericordiae, vita dulcedo et spes nostra salve. A te clamamus, exules Filii Eve, a te suspiramus, gementes afflentes, in hac lacrimarum vale, ea ergo advocata nostra, illos tuos misericordes oculos, ad nos converte, et Iesum benedictum fructum ventris tui, nobis post hoc exilium ostende, o clemens, o pia, o dulcis Virgo Maria. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you so much again for joining us for the download. We premiere a new episode like this every weekday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. From all of us here at Church Militant, God bless you.